A man rents a room from a landlady and agrees to pay extra on the condition that she prepares his work lunch every day. On the first day, she makes him a sandwich with regular bread using leftover meatloaf from the previous night, adds some fruit and a bottle of soda. When he returns home, he politely tells her that it wasn't quite enough food. The next day, she makes 2 turkey sandwiches, adds a container of salad, some crackers with peanut butter, and a slice of cake. That night, he thanks her, but mentions that while the food was delicious, he was still hungry and asks if she could make a bit more tomorrow. The following day, she uses long slices of sourdough bread to create 2 large sandwiches, includes crackers and peanut butter, chips and dip, veggies with ranch dressing, and a full 2-liter soda. That night, he smiles kindly and says it was almost enough, but not quite. The next day, she decides to go all out, cutting a loaf of bread in half and stuffing it with pounds of meat, cheese, a whole head of lettuce, tomatoes, onions, and all sorts of vegetables and sauces. When he returns that evening, he looks at the meal, raises an eyebrow, and dryly remarks, "So, I see we're back to 1 sandwich?" 3 kids were having a heated debate about whose dad was the fastest. "My dad is the fastest," Anya declared proudly. "He's a builder and can throw a brick off the 5th floor, race down the stairs, and catch it before it even hits the ground." "That's nothing," Brad interjected. "My dad is way faster. He's a professional archer, and he can shoot an arrow at a wolf's head, then run and catch the wolf before the arrow even lands." "Impressive," said Tommy, "but my dad is even faster." Anya and Brad looked at him curiously. "What makes you say that?" they asked. Tommy grinned and replied, "My dad's been working at the DMV for 20 years. He's supposed to get off at 5 p.m., but he's so fast he's home by 1. A woman noticed her closet door making strange creaking sounds every time a bus passed by outside, so she called a carpenter to check it out. The carpenter arrived, examined the door, and found nothing unusual. But just as a bus crossed the street, the loud creaking noise came again. He was baffled. "That's very strange," said the carpenter, rubbing his chin. "I wonder if I could figure it out by sitting inside the closet when the next bus comes by." The wife, though confused, agreed it might help, so the carpenter went inside the closet and waited. A few minutes later, the husband came home. As he passed the bedroom, he noticed the closet door was open. He walked in and froze. There, sitting in the closet, was a man. He looked at the bathroom, then back at the carpenter, his face darkening with rage. "What the hell are you doing in my house, in my closet?" he growled. The carpenter gulped and stammered, "Well, would you believe I'm just waiting for the bus?" A Chinese tourist arrives in Los Angeles for a holiday and takes a taxi from LAX to his hotel. Along the way, he sees a few buses and comments to the driver, "The buses here are so slow and noisy. In China, the buses are much faster." The taxi driver says nothing and continues driving. A little later, the tourist notices some boats on the water and says, "The boats here are so slow too. In China, the boats are much faster." The taxi driver remains silent, driving calmly. When they finally reach the hotel, the tourist gets out of the taxi and asks for the fare. He looks at the meter, astonished. "Are you serious?" he exclaims. "Your buses are slow, the boats are slow, everything here is slow, so how come the taxi meter is so fast?" The driver smiles and replies, "It's made in China." One afternoon, a man approached an elderly gentleman with a concerned look on his face. "I have something to tell you," he said, lowering his voice. "I just saw your young wife at the park, meeting someone who looked like one of your friends." The old man's eyes widened with alarm. His mind raced as he imagined the worst. Without another word, he bolted towards the park, determined to catch his wife in the act of what he feared might be a secret rendezvous. After a frantic search through the park, he finally returned home, his face flushed with anger and frustration. He stormed up to the man who had given him the troubling news and said, "You're making me crazy. I went to the park, and my wife doesn't have any friends. The person she was with wasn't anyone I know." A large corporation hires a tribe of ex-cannibals, assuring them, you have full employee rights, but you're not allowed to eat anyone. Everything goes smoothly for several weeks until the CEO calls the tribe into his office. One of our employees has been missing for several days, the CEO says. This is awkward to ask, but did you eat them? The chief of the tribe checks with his people and replies, no, sir. We have left that part of our lives behind. We haven't eaten anyone. The CEO, still suspicious but lacking evidence, apologizes and sends them back to work. Once they're out of earshot, the chief turns to his tribe and asks, okay, which one of you idiots did it? A tribesman sheepishly raises his hand and admits, I ate the cleaning lady. The chief slaps his forehead in frustration. You fool! We've been eating department heads, marketing executives, and efficiency consultants for weeks and no one noticed. But you had to go and eat someone they'll actually miss. A Japanese company and a Swedish company decided to hold a rowing competition as a publicity stunt. Both teams trained rigorously for the event. When the competition came, the Japanese team won by 1 kilometer. The Swedish company's leadership was shocked, but they quickly sprang into action. They requested a rematch the following year to save face. The Japanese team agreed. Determined to uncover why they lost, the Swedish company formed a special task force to investigate. After months of study, the task force concluded that the Japanese team had one person steering the boat while the rest were rowing. On the Swedish team, however, one person was rowing and everyone else was steering. Taking this report seriously, the company hired a consultant to address the issue. After months of analysis, the expert concluded that the Swedish team had too few rowers and too many people steering. Armed with this newfound knowledge, the Swedish company implemented immediate changes. They added 2 steersmen, 2 senior steersmen, a captain, and kept 1 rower. The rower was also enrolled in a bonus scheme to encourage better performance. A year later, the rematch took place, and to everyone's surprise, the Japanese won again, this time by 3 kilometers. The Swedish company's management knew exactly how to respond. They fired the rower for poor performance, awarded large bonuses to all the managers for their effective strategy, and decided that next year they'd try designing a better boat. 3 technicians go for a job interview at the local telephone company. They are all highly qualified and seem like great candidates. The boss brings them into his office and says, you 3 look great on paper, but I need to know if you have what it takes for the day-to-day work. So here's what I'll do. I'll give you 1 day to impress me. Go out and set as many telephone poles as you can and report back tomorrow. The 3 technicians head out to work setting poles, and the next day they return to the office. The boss asks them one by one how many poles they set. The first technician reports, I set 13 poles. Wow, 13. That's impressive, the boss says with a smile. The second technician says, I set 9 poles. Well, the boss responds, not as many as the first guy, but still impressive. He turns to the third technician. How many did you set? The third technician proudly says, 2. 2? That's it? The boss exclaims, shocked. What were you doing all day? The technician smiles, adjusts his blonde hair, and says, well, I didn't want to be a snitch, but these guys, they only put their poles halfway in the ground. Agency. Sir, we've found 3 candidates who meet your requirements. How would you like to assign their placements? Manager. Simple. Here's what you do. Put 100 bricks in a closed room, send the candidates in, and close the door. Leave them alone for a few hours, then come back and analyze the situation. If they're counting the bricks, put them in accounts. If they're recounting the bricks, send them to auditing. If they've messed up the whole room with bricks everywhere, put them in engineering. If they're arranging the bricks in a strange order, send them to planning. If they're throwing bricks at each other, put them in operations. If they're sleeping, send them to security. If they're breaking the bricks into pieces, send them to IT. If they're sitting idle, put them in human resources. If they say they've tried every combination and not a single brick has moved, put them in sales. If they've already left for the day, put them in marketing. If they're staring out of the window, put them in strategic planning. And if they're talking to each other and haven't moved a single brick, congratulate them and put them in management.